Anita says, "Greetings, gentlemen. I was wondering if Charles would comment on a story that just came to my attention about the Premier of Quebec wanting to ban prayer in public places.
God.
The Premier cites the need to curb Islamism as his justification for a policy of strengthening secularization laws. But if you ask me, this is really a disguised attack on the Catholic Church, which is always the ultimate target of pushes for secularization. Even the Catholic bishops of Quebec can sort of see this, although their response is incredibly lackluster and weak tea. Sadly, we have very few Dagger Johns or Blessed Clemens von Gallens in the hierarchy today. What does Charles think about this? Thank you and God bless."
The current Prime Minister of Quebec, the current Premier, is a toad. He's a worthless piece of garbage. And I mean that in the most loving way imaginable. The garbage man, or the garbage person, I guess I have to say, I don't want to assign him a particular gender. The garbage person actually campaigned on not removing the crucifix from the Speaker's chair in the Parliament of Quebec. And when his toad-like person was seated in office, he did just that. He's a piece of garbage, utter piece of garbage, which virtually all Quebecois politicians have been since the Quiet Revolution. You know, there's basically Tweedledum and Tweedledummer, both trying to become Tweedledummest. Utter scum. And I think reading the situation is right. As far as the bishops of Quebec go, again, as the politicians have been, so the bishops have been since the Quiet Revolution. The Révolution Tranquille, which saw the end of our justification for existence, which was to be the great French, Catholic, and Latin fact in the New World, in North America, and a springboard, you might say, for evangelization. Instead, we've turned into garbage people who can't even reproduce. And our politicians and our bishops are symbols of that. That's what they do represent what we've become. That is true. Slime. Now, I have to say that I do see some shoots of hope in the younger generation. About 10 years ago, there was a wonderful band that's still going, a folk band in Quebec called Mes Aïeux. And they came up with this tremendous song, which I played for you at the time, De Génération, which compares the scumbags we've become with what our better fathers were, or better forefathers, and our not so good fathers. Most recently, there's been a new strain of French Canadian nationalism, which seems a bit saner. A fellow called François Gervais has started something called the Nouvelle Alliance de Quebec. It's not a very large group. They've got 3 branches, I think, in Quebec City, Montreal, and Sherbrooke. And I can't say that I agree with everything they say, but they're certainly an awful lot saner than the garbage that's coming out of the establishment politicians in Quebec. But our questioner is right. This so-called, laicité is an attack on the faith. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot fight a positive, that is to say, a real asserted thing like Islam, with a negative like secularism. You have to fight it, if fight is the word, with a truer and more real religion, not with a negation of reality like the secularists would have. Because you're going to have a religion, Secularism is, in a sense, a religion. It's not much of one, it's a stupid one. And its high priests are morons, that is to say, the people who run the show. Not our show, the political show. But it is a faith of sorts. And unfortunately, it is dominant and has helped put us where we are. Certainly in Canada, as in France, as in, well, throughout Europe, really. Um, it's created the population implosion, which our immigrant friends are rushing to fill. Um, you have an incredible poubelle like what's his face, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, who's just beyond worthless. I all I can tell you to people like Gervais and anyone else in our beloved northern neighbor, for God's sake, look to your traditions and pull them up and pull them back and pull them out. Because there's nothing else, unless you want to become even more of a sewer than we are. Because, mind you, it's the same but different in the States. We have sewage of our own special American kind, star-spangled.
Star-spangled sewage.
Yep. Star-spangled sewage.
I wanted to ask you something about was one of the first things you said. So he campaigned on keeping the crucifix in the chamber.
And the speaker's throne.
Speaker's throne.
The crucifix was over the head of whatever moron that happened to sit there.
So he campaigned on that.
Yeah, and keeping it.
And so that's so specific and unusual in a certain sense.
Well, because it's been an issue that has been fought over for a long time. See, Quebec, back in the 1930s, under our great statesman, Maurice Duplessis, during the period when the church in Quebec and around the world was very vibrant and was pushing for the whole notion of the kingship of Christ, the crucifix was placed on the speakers' thrones in both houses in the Quebec Parliament. In those days, they had the Legislative Council, which was the upper house, the Legislative Assembly, which is the lower house. All right. Well, in common with all the other provinces of Canada, in those days, you have a lieutenant governor who represents the governor general, who represents the king. And they would have a very elaborate opening ceremony, the opening of Parliament, and in which the governor general in Ottawa and the lieutenant governors in the different provinces would basically play the role the king plays in London, and on occasion has played in Quebec and in Ottawa, and the other dominions, Canberra and Wellington and so forth, Cape Town once upon a time. I mean, it's a tremendous thing when the king opened Parliament in Quebec, and Duplessis was standing there, quite happy at having pulled it off. So the thing was that all that, and then of course the viceregal personage makes the speech from the throne, which is really written for him by the governor of the day, and then he declares the thing open. Well, in 1968, the government in Quebec did away with all that. Now, the Constitution requires that the lieutenant governor open Parliament, but they got rid of all the ceremonial and the ritual. Same with the royal assent, and which is another ceremony where the governor general, the lieutenant governor, comes in, and they recite the names of bills, and he would nod his head and affirming the assent. On the rare occasions when the assent was refused, they would say, "Le roi s'avisera," which means the king will take it under advisement, meaning, psh.
Yeah.
Anyway, but normally just have the inclined head. So all that was done away with, and the bare minimum that the Constitution required is all they kept. Now, this is at once a great and a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing because it's too bad they did away with all that. But obviously, as we saw with the accession proclamations when the king came to power 2 years ago, he came to reign, most politicians don't believe in any of that rigmarole. They just maintain it to maintain it.
Yeah.
And I was amused in reading a history of the Quebec Parliament, the story of how that was gotten rid of in '68, and they referred to it. This is beautifully French Canadian. They referred to it as la liturgie parlementaire, the parliamentary liturgy. So just like the old mass, it had to be disposed of, and so it was, for the same reason, because the Catholic mind, even when it's gone to total pot, it can't pretend the way the Protestant mind can. They no longer believed, and so it had to go. Now, the other thing they did in that year was they got rid of the upper house, the Conseil Législatif, and they replaced it with the Assemblée. The Assemblée Législative became the Assemblée Nationale, the National Assembly. Pretending to a sort of independence. The crucifixes were maintained in both chairs, in both things, but from that time until this, the scumbag people have wanted it out. This came to a head in the last election, and the scumbag who won campaigned on keeping it. And then, as chief scumbag, he had to take it out.
But I guess my question is, how does he feel he can do that and still feel confident and still feel confident he'll be reelected?
Yeah, well, because he knows that, because he got away with it. I mean, there was no great outroar, no great outcry.
Wow. Well, then...
Well, believe me, the people of Quebec are not absolved from responsibility.
Yeah.
Any more than the people of California.
Yeah.
Or the people of anywhere you like when they got rid of Roe v. Wade. See, we have to accept something. One of the myths dear to quote-unquote conservatives is that the masses of the population are still somehow sound. We're not. We've had decades of indoctrination by morons. We've eaten up with our mother's milk. Not my mother's milk, of course. She was a lot older. But the vast majority of people today are children of that era, whether they like it or not. Their boomer parents and grandparents spoon-fed them crap, and they ate it. And now they believe it. And they may not like elements of it. And they may not like some of what comes in. But basically, what does it all boil down to? Free sex. That's why we're for abortion. That's why we're for birth control. That's why we're for secularism. Because we don't like the idea that we don't have the right to do whatever we want, and that there is someone who judges, and that when we snuff it, we'll have to account for what we've done. We don't like that. You're bad. And no matter what else we complain about that the terrible boomers like myself have done to us, we suck up the crap. But, it's a package deal. If you don't like the bad stuff that we've brought you, well, then you need to reject it all. But if you want to keep the crap we gave you, gotta forget about the good stuff that we destroyed. You can't have. Too bad. Package. And I mean that in the most loving, Yuletide-ish way imaginable.